Good morning, everybody. Welcome to IndyCar on, what is it, the 27th today of March. Today I wanted to talk to you about something, well, we used to hear a lot about this during the first referendum, the business of Britishness and Scottishness, and whether you feel one or the other, or whether you feel Irishness or Welshness. Now, this personal identification of an individual as being of one group or another is a kind of fundamental thing to human beings. We tend to think of ourselves as being part of a tribe or a family or a clan or a group, and this has been a fundamental human survival instinct of grouping together in large numbers for protection and mutual aid and survival, which, you know, at the time when it came about was probably a great idea, especially when human beings were, well, relatively speaking, not as strong as some of the other apex predators that they were living amongst, and had to defend themselves against things like lions or tigers or wild boar or woolly mammoth or wherever it was. But now we're in a society where we've already killed off all these apex predators and we're quite safe, and yet we still have this fundamental issue hanging over us of this tribal identification. But what's interesting about it, and this was highlighted in an article by Fintan O'Toole in the Irish Times yesterday, is that if you transplant this business of Britishness or Irishness or Scottishness into the Irish context, when the Good Friday Agreement, or the Belfast Agreement as it's sometimes called, was drawn up, what it effectively did was it removed an obstacle to peace in Ireland by having the Republic relinquish its historical claim on the north of Ireland. So by doing that, they basically said that people in the north of Ireland would have freedom to be or to feel as British as they wished, or as Irish as they wished. They could practice whichever faith they wanted, and they would be free to move around the whole island of Ireland, believing in whatever they wanted and identifying with whatever country they wished, because the North would be supported by the United Kingdom financially, whereas the Republic would support itself and govern itself. But the island of Ireland as a whole would be at peace, because there would be no longer this enmity between the Republic and the British state. So in other words, peace was basically declared between the Republic and the United Kingdom at the time. And that has held for a long, long time. Since the Good Friday Agreement, there has been a relative peace on the island of Ireland. There are still punishment beatings, and there are still a nasty whiff of sectarianism still around the place. But gradually that has diminished over the decades. Until now, until we finally get ourselves to this point where Brexit starts to interfere with that peace process and interfere with that ongoing process of reconciliation and acceptance of one another. And that is basically what Ireland is at the moment, is at that stage where the Republic and the South has accepted the North and Great Britain. And people who live in the North who don't support the United Kingdom are perfectly free to regard themselves as Irish Republicans, and that doesn't alter their status in any way at all, because nobody is claiming anything is British or Irish. It is merely the people who feel that way. They either feel British or they feel Irish. But it doesn't matter, because that's all being put at risk now by Brexit. The issue of Scottishness, Englishness, Welshness is also irrelevant now in this context, because a lot was made of this during the first independence referendum, where the British government was trying to characterise Scottish independence as an identity crisis for Scots. In other words, they were basically saying, you know, do you feel Scottish or do you feel British? Now, people who felt British obviously felt safe or safer as a part of the United Kingdom, and that was why they identified with it. They felt safer, they felt protected, they felt part of something bigger, something which they had been told and led to believe would always give them extra muscle, the famous UK's broad shoulders, you know, to shoulder the heavy burden of debt and things like this. But what was forgotten in these pieces of rhetoric was that the broad shoulders of the United Kingdom are buckling under the weight of the huge amount of debt that the person who owns those broad shoulders has run up over the last decades. And so although the shoulders are still broad, the ability to carry the load has diminished because the load has got so great, this self-imposed burden of debt and deficit that the UK has now got. It's got to the point where those broad shoulders are basically about to dislocate under the load. And if you look at the actual facts and figures, you'll discover that in the past, 10 years of Tory rule, that the national debt has actually doubled. So quite, the opposite of what they're telling you, that the deficit is reduced. The deficit might have reduced, but the debt has increased. And the debt has increased because we're still borrowing more and more money in the United Kingdom. But the business of feeling British and Scottish has nothing at all to do with any of this. And if tomorrow Britain left the European Union, people like me wouldn't feel any less European or any less Scots. But the physical reality would be we would have been taken away from those familiar surroundings, that familiar comforting feeling of being part of something bigger, which we are told we have to be part of the UK's version of that's somehow got the broad shoulders and it can protect us. Except that its broad shoulders are an eighth of the width of the European Union's broad shoulders. So all this broad shouldering stuff that we hear is largely down to a question of scale. But the point of this story is that you can feel anything you like. You can feel British or Scottish, you can feel Highlands, you can feel Gaelic, you can feel like an islander. It doesn't really matter. The reality of your situation is that you're governed by a foreign country. And the reality of your daily life is that that foreign country has made a very, very stupid decision and is about to affect the way you live your life in a very fundamental and very damaging way. Things are about to get a lot worse for you. So what I'm saying here is that it doesn't matter whether you feel British or not. Even if you feel British, you can still support independence for Scotland and still feel British. You can still identify as British or English or Welsh or whatever you like. But if independence comes, remember it's coming not just for people who are SNP voters, it's coming for people like me who are not SNP voters, but who want independence because we know that being governed from a country capital of another country 500 or 600 miles away is damaging us, and it's going to damage us even further, and it's going to cripple our economy. When you know that, the feelings of Britishness and all the rest of it have no relevance anymore, because the reality is that you're going to be poor. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your business. People all across Scotland are going to lose their jobs, and businesses are going to fold because big businesses which export support small businesses which supply them in the supply chain or supply them with services like food or banking or whatever else. So it's not just those export jobs that go. But at the same time, people can still feel British. You can have an independent Scotland where 20% of the population feel British. You could have an independent Scotland where 20% of the population can hold dual British and Scottish citizenship at the same time, and it makes no difference at all to the realities of life. Independence for Scotland means safety and security. Remaining in the European Union gives us breathing space, it gives us time to think, and it means that things won't change and jobs won't be lost. That doesn't affect whether you're British, Scottish, Irish, Welsh or whatever. Doesn't make any difference to that. You're free to feel whatever you like. This is what Fintan O'Toole was saying in the Times yesterday, is that in Ireland you are allowed to believe or to identify with anything you like. You're still living in a peaceful Ireland. It's not completely united, but then the south of Ireland, the Republic, may not want to reunify with what is basically a vassal state of the UK, which is impoverished, has high unemployment rates, and still is riven with all kinds of social deprivation and problems. So it would be a colossal undertaking for Ireland to reunify, may not even be ready to do that. But Ireland is at peace because the people on that island can believe what they wish, and they can feel as British or Irish as they want to. And that's really what this is all about today. This programme, if anything, is just to remind us all that you can feel Scottish, or you can feel British or English or Welsh or Irish or whatever. If you're living in Scotland, the reality for you will be better. If you're living in an independent Scotland, the reality for you will be far, far better than for the rest of the United Kingdom. Because if Scotland dissolves its union, its treaty with England, and decides to remain in the European Union for the time being, then things in Scotland will remain safe. And it's not about the broad shoulders this time. It's about the load that those shoulders are supporting. When you're in the European Union, the load that's being supported is being supported by 28 countries, not just one, or not just two. And therefore Scotland is always going to have a lighter load to carry if it's in the EU than it will do if it stays in union with an isolated United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, what is left of it, is the final remnant. It's the dead core of the British imperial state, the British Empire. It's the last kernel, the last little part of that that is still flickering, but it's about to be extinguished, because at the end of this process, at the end of Brexit, whatever it may be, we will be left with the country of England, which wants to separate itself from Europe, sees itself as English, calls itself British, but what it really means is it's England first. And England wants to do its own thing, and Scotland and Ireland and Wales don't matter. We have to follow England according to their edict. But actually we don't. And Scotland, as I've said before, is unique among the Celtic nations of these islands in that it can separate itself quite legally and quite independently, separate itself from England by simply repealing the Acts of Union and ending the treaty that began all this in 1707. But remember, the Treaty of Union was broken almost as soon as it was signed, because the Treaty of Union promised that when Scotland's Parliament was suspended and moved to Westminster, it was on the assumption, not the assumption, but it was on the written promise in the Union that a new Parliament would be created. Not only that, but the new Parliament would be governed by a new United Kingdom constitution. And that constitution was never written. And because it was never written, the act was broken, the treaty was broken as soon as it actually started to work. As soon as the Scots MPs arrived at Westminster, that treaty had already been broken. So it's not really a big deal to end the treaty. But what it does do, if you feel British or Scottish or Welsh or Irish, whatever, doesn't affect that, because when Scotland separates itself from England and realigns itself back into the European Union, we can still feel European, but we can feel European and have a European reality, and that reality is that it's no more just broad shoulders of the United Kingdom carrying the enormous debt that the United Kingdom has run up. It is 28 member states of the European Union helping the smaller countries like Scotland to remain stable and to attract business investment and to receive grant aid and funding for some of its most remote areas and the coasts and the islands where investment is difficult and travel is difficult. These things flow from being part of something bigger, but they don't prevent us from remaining Scottish. And even if you are living in Scotland and you didn't originally want independence, you can still have it, and you can still feel British if you want. You can still feel Irish if you want, Welsh if you want, Danish if you want, whatever you wish. Nobody in Scotland or anywhere else can tell you how to feel or what you identify with, and that's never ever been an issue in Scotland, and it never will be an issue. So that's really about it today. It's not really a news programme today. What I'm trying to explain to you today is that what you identify as in terms of nationality is largely completely irrelevant to what's happening in the reality of politics today. The reality of politics today is that a government of another country, i.e. England, has decided that our country, Scotland, has got to do something damaging and stupid to itself because England says so. And we are the only country on the face of this planet which allows a neighbouring country to force us to do things without a war, without weapons being pointed at us. But we meekly go along with this because we're part of the so-called United Kingdom. Well, the so-called United Kingdom is ending, and it's coming to a quiet end because there's going to be a massive anticlimax when the British state finally disintegrates back into its individual components. It is going to go out with a whimper rather than a bang, because there isn't any energy left in the United Kingdom to create a bang. Mrs May and her friends in Westminster have just not seen this coming. They've tried to cling on to empire for as long as possible, and they're clutching at a dream now, a dream that somehow or other England can rule the waves again and that Britain will be great and all this nonsense. And it is just a fantasy. The reality of the situation is Britain's not great. Britain's about to become immensely diminished by Brexit. And Scottish people who live in Scotland who are not born here, not naturalised Scots or not born Scots, they know that it would be stupid to go down with the ship when you don't need to. And I'm guessing that quite a lot of people who've migrated from England to Scotland for a better life will be much happier to vote to be independent and to remain in Europe than they would to remain part of the United Kingdom and go down with this sinking ship. So it's not about what we identify as, it's about how safe we feel in the political situation that we're in. So remember, when you want to be part of something bigger for protection, make sure that you're part of something very big and not a tiny, diminishing, dying empire which is in the last embers of its existence as England is. Why would you want to cling to something that's dying? I mean, that's a bit like hugging a corpse. Why not get out of the grave and actually go and live in the land of the living? Because that's what separating ourselves from England and ending the Union will be like. We'll be rejoining our friends in Europe, we'll be gaining back all that security and safety and protection, and we will be able to take part in the free market and to continue life as we do now, with an expanding and growing economy and with a stable, well-governed country. And it doesn't matter whether we feel British, Scottish, Welsh or Irish to do that. It has absolutely nothing at all to do with it. I'll leave you with those thoughts today. I'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.